This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last year before Pesach. This is a gehoibinah subject. This is a very lofty topic. And we'll try to hit the main points, and we'll try to add a few new chidushim. And this comes from in the new sefer. It's Maimer Lamed Zayin, page Taf Yud Beis. And it's something, Dvarim Ha'imdim Berumai Shalaylam. You know, when Paroi began his assault to try to come and attack Klal Yisrael when we were leaving Mitzrayim. So the pasuk says, "Vayikach sheish me'os rechev bachor." He took 600 choice chariots, v'chol rechev Mitzrayim, and all the chariots of Egypt. So the question is, if he took all the chariots of Egypt, obviously he took the 600 choicest chariots. Ask the Arizal in the Sefer HaKavanos on page 42, B'chlal Masayimana. If Paroi took all the chariots, so then why would it have to say he took the 600? The 600 are part of all the chariots. I think you all know that one of my favorite subjects is the topic of Ani V'hoi Hoshiana. And Ani and V'hoi, which used to be very mysterious names of Hashem, but we've discussed it a number of times over the years. The Gemara in Sukkah, in Parak Dalet and Mishnah Hay, says that part of the mitzvah of the Arava is we would encircle the Mizbeach, and we would say Ani V'hoi Hoshiana. And the question is, what does Ani V'hoi mean? So Rashi says Ani V'hoi is Gematria Ana Hashem, but then Rashi says that Ani and V'hoi are two of God's 72 names. We've said many times that in Parshas B'Shalach, when the Rebbe was taking us out of Mitzrayim and splitting the sea, we have 3 consecutive psukim of 72 letters. Va'yasa, Vayave, and Vayet. And they were both 72 letters. They were both 72 letters. All 3 of these psukim are 72 letters. And the way you formulate the 72 different names of Hashem is through a procedure that the Zayar calls Yoishar, Hafach, and Yoishar. You take the first letter of the first pasuk, the last letter of the second, the first of the last, and that spells out V'hoi. V'hoi, you take the Vav of the first pasuk, which is Vayasa, and the Hey of Vayave, and the Vav of Vayet and V'hoi. And in 72 letters, there are 2 groups. There's 1 through 36, and there's 37 through 72. So the first name is V'hoi, Ani is named 37, and therefore the 2 chief names of God are Ani and V'hoi. Okay, Marv Rabbi say that's par for the course, that we're very familiar with. Hashem has 72 different names, each one consisting of 3 letters. However, comes one of the great all-time Mekubalim from Morocco, the Avir Yaakov, Rav Yaakov Avichatzera. And he says that, if Hashem has 72 names and each name has 3 letters, then it's a total of 216 letters. So we know, who would ever say all 216 letters? Only the Kohen Gadol. When he would enter the Kodesh HaKadoshim. What is the Kodesh HaKadoshim called? Devir, Dalet Vez Yud Reish. Why is it called Devir? Because Devir is, what is 72 times 3? 72 times 3 is 216. Devir is equal to 216 because there's only one place in the world where we would articulate all 216 letters of Hashem's name, and that is the Devir. Now, this past summer I had the zchus to visit Germany. Yeah, there used to be something in the olden days called travel, where people used to go on airplanes. An airplane is some kind of invention that they made back in the day when people used to go from one country to another. Yeah, but that's just academic. It's not even relevant anymore. And one of the Gedolim's Kvarim that we visited was the Maram Shif, Rav Meir Shif, who's one of the most concise of all the Achronim. And the Maram Shif comments on the pasuk, Vayikach sheish me'os rechev bachor. And he took 600 choice chariots, v'chol rechev Mitzrayim, and all the chariots of Mitzrayim. And the Maram Shif says, Davar oyam v'noira, that this pasuk is a great remez. He took sheish, he took the number 6, me'os, that could be read from the word rechev, the word rechev. Rechev is 216. Paroi subtracted 6 from 222. Excuse me. Rechev is 222. Rechev. And Paroi took away 6 from 222, getting 216. And that was Paro's kavana. Vayikach sheish. He took away 6. Me'ois rechev, from the word rechev. And he took it away from 222. And what did he have left? Bachur. Bachur is 216. Oyoim v'noira. You got that? Vayikach sheish. He took the number 6. Me'ois rechev, from the word rechev. And he was left with Bachur. He was left with 216. And Mar Rabbi say, clearly, Paroi had very deep kavanos, and if he was not aware, then perhaps his ministering angel was aware that somehow Paroi had to get down to 216 to be able to take on the Ribono Shel Olam and be able to take on Klal Yisrael, which he did. So Paroi took 222 Rechev, and he subtracted 6, and he got 216. Comes the Arizal, and he adds a little bit further. So the Arizal explains that Paroi understood that the Koyach HaKedusha, the great power of holiness, emanates from God's full name, which is 216. And in order to combat it, in order to attack it, in order to counteract it, he also needs to counteract it with the Koyach HaTumah of 216. And therefore Paroi also got together and the power of 216 Latuma. And by doing that, he was able to attack Klal Yisrael. In other words, Paroi understood that God's full name is 216 Devir, and in order to combat that, he had to come with the Koyach HaTumah of 216, which is Rechev 222, minus 6, and that gets you to 216. So how's the Ribono Shel Olam going to counteract that? How's the Ribono Shel Olam going to defeat Paroi? So what does the pasuk say? Mar kavois Paroi v'cheloi yara vayam. The chariots of Paroi and his cavalry, yara is 215. God knocked him down to 215 so that he would not be able to counteract the Koyach HaKedusha. So again, Paroi started with 222 and he subtracted 6, he got to 216. And the Ribono Shel Olam, in order to counteract Paroi, knocked him down to 215. Markavos Paroi v'cheloi yara vayam. And perhaps you've not been seen this number 216 before, but when you study it, you will notice that the number 216 is everywhere. And that is because each one of the luchais were 108 tfachim. And each luach was 108 tfachim, so 108 plus 108 is 216. So the luchais were 216 tfachim. The siman is Vayavor Hashem al panav. The word Vayavor is Ayin Beis, the 72 letter names of Hashem, and Reish Yod Vav, God's full name, which is 216. So what we're learning is that the Ribono Shel Olam wanted to take us out of Egypt, and he did take us out of Egypt with the koyach of 216. Paroi wanted to counteract it, so he took 222, and he subtracted 400. He subtracted 6, and he got to 216. He took 222, subtracted 6. It says Rav Menachem Mendel Mirimanov. The power of 216 is alluded to in the pasuk. Amar Oyev Erdoif Asig Achalik Shalal Timlaimai Nafshi Arik Charbi Torishema Yadi. The name Torishema, the word of Torishema, says Rav Menachem Mendel Mirimanov in the Sefer Ilana Dechaye. Torishema is Shemois Reish Yod Vav. Shemois Reish Yod Vav. The names of Hashem, which are a total of 216 letters. Continues Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzera in his Sefer Machsef Halavan. He says another remez is in the beginning of the Shira. It says Vayar Yisrael, Es Mitzrayim es Hasayam. Vayar Yisrael Sayar Agdoila. Vayiru ha'am es Hashem. Vayar, Vayiru, all of these, the word Vayar is also Gematria, basically 216, and we'll take out the Aleph, we'll take out one. Now these 216 times 3, 216 times 3 is what? 448. Gematria, 216 times 3 is 648. Gematria Terachim. Hashem used these shemos to be Merachim on Klal Yisrael. It's also Gematria Tacharim. Hashem used these shemos to destroy Mitzrayim. In fact, the Holy Chassam Sofer says something amazing. He says the Rashi Tevos of Hein Am B'nei Yisrael Rav, the Rashi Tevos of Am B'nei Yisrael. Am B'nei Ayin Beis is 72. Yisrael Rav Va'atzim is 216. Now, amazingly, the Megala Amukos teaches us that the name 216 was already alluded to Avram Avinu when he foresaw and prophesied about the Bris Bein HaBasarim. Because the pasuk says, "Vayhi Hashem eshba'a, va'alata haya, v'hinei sanur v'ashan v'lapidesh asher avar bein hagezarim ha'ila." The words "avar bein hagezarim" is a remes to Kriyas Yamsuf. Because by Kriyas Yamsuf it says "L'goyzer Yamsuf l'gzarim" for the 12 cuttings that Hashem made, and Hashem cut the Yamsuf with the 72-letter name of Hashem. And the remes to this is, the pasuk says, "V'hu oimed aleihem." For example, it says "V'hu avar bein hagezarim." V'hu refers to, says Megala Amukos, that the Mitzrayim subjugated Klal Yisrael with the Koyach HaTumah, which is 215, which comes from the Soifei Tevos of Ki Ger Yihya Zaracha, Ki Ger Yihya, and the Shibud was Nisbatel at the time of Kriyas Yamsuf with Yara. Be it as it may, says the Arizal and the Megala Amukos, the number 216 played a prominent role in Yetzias Mitzrayim and in overcoming the power of Paroi. So Paroi was ultimately destroyed with 215. Markavais Paroi v'chela Yara Vayam. You see, 215 represents the Koyach HaTumah. That is why in the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, where it talks about the Arba Avos Nazikin and all the various forces of evil in this world, it says Loi Harei Zeh Kaharei Zeh. Keeps on saying the word Harei, Harei, Harei. Says Rabbi Yaakov Finsi in his Psichat Masechta Avos, in the Sefer Zechus Avos. In the beginning of Baba Kama, it keeps on saying Harei, Harei, Harei as a remez that with the Kayach of 215, the Ribbanu Shalom overcame Paroi, and 215 is a Kayach Hara, and therefore in the context of the Kayach Hara, in the context of the first Mishnah of Baba Kama, it says Harei, 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 Harei. This is the amazing revelation of the Arizal, expounded by Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzera and the Sefer Zechus Avos. That is why Avraham Avinu, when he came into Eretz Yisrael, the Zohar asked, why does it say Vayavar Avram Ba'aretz? Why doesn't it say Vayelech? And the Zohar says Vayavar is a lashon of Ayin Beis Reish Yud Vav. Avram Avinu used the 72-letter name of Hashem and the 216 to be able to insert Kedusha and infuse Kedusha into Eretz Yisrael. I'll tell you another amazing concept, another amazing idea. We know there's something called the mitzvah of challah. What is the shear of challah? How much dough is chayiv in challah? So the Shach brings down the amount of dough needed to be chayiv in challah is gematria challah. Challah is gematria 43, and it could be called ha-challah. 43 plus a hay is 5.2, 43.2 eggs. What's the significance of 43.2 eggs? The answer is, how many fifths are in 43.2? Well, 43 times 5 is what? 215. And plus another fifth is 216. There are 216 chumashe beim in chala. Likewise, the concept of Eruv. Eruv is ayin beis, reish yud vav. So again, so many times we see this concept and this idea that the Koyach HaKedusha is 216, that's the full name of Hashem. That's why it's called Devir. That's why Yaakov Avinu, that's why Paro started out with 222. He took away 6. And after taking away 6, he was left with 216. And he was able to attack, he attempted to attack Klal Yisrael. And the Rebbe Shem had to knock him down. And the Rebbe Shem ultimately knocked him down to 15 Yara. Yara is a Koyach HaTumah. That's why it says, Loi harezeh kaharezeh. Now, what's very interesting is, and this is what bothered me, we have to understand, why would Paroi need to start off with 222 and then take away 6? In other words, why is Paroi going to the 222 store and taking away 6? Let him go straight to the 216 store. What's this Indian that Paroi goes to Rechev, which is 222, and he takes away 6 and he gets to 216, and then Hashem has to knock him down to 215. Let him go straight to 216. What's 222? So, the Gemara in Pesachim says on Daf Kufya Tesam Beis. The Gemara in Pesachim says that in the future, La'asad Lavai, when the Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to make a big Suda for the Tzaddikim. And after they eat and drink, they're going to give Avram Avinu the kais to be Mavarechan, and he's going to say, I can't make a bracha because Yishmael came out of me. Then the Rebbe Shem is going to say to Yitzchak, go and make a bracha. And Yitzchak's going to say, I can't because Esav came out of me. And then Hashem's going to say to Yaakov, make a bracha. And he's going to say, I can't. I married 2 sisters. And Hashem's going to say to Moshe, make the bracha. He says, I can't. I never entered Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem's going to say to Yeshua, make a bracha. And he's going to say, I can't. I never had a son. And then Hashem's going to say to David, make a bracha. And David's going to say, Ani avarech, li noel avarech. Shenemar kois Yeshua's esa. Uveshem Hashem ekra. So we see the pasuk of kois Yeshua's. That demonstrates that David HaMelech is right to make a bracha. Now the question is, how big was David's kois? So the Gemara says in Yuma, Daf Ayin Vav, that David's kois was 221 lugim. Shenemar koisi revaya. Revaya is 221. Says Rav Nassan Gestetner Zechatzak Levracha, Hashem came to David to make Berchas Hamazon La'asad Lavai. Paroi knew that if Klal Yisrael leave Mitzrayim, very likely they may enter Eretz Yisrael directly, and would bring the Tikkun HaAchroin, and the Tikkun HaAchroin, and that final Berchas Hamazon is represented by the number 221. 221 is Kaisi Revaya, the Kais of David HaMelech. So therefore Paroi came to be Mavatal that with 222 Mitzad HaKedusha. And therefore he said, Paroi took 222. That's why La'asad Lavai we're going to tell David, Toil Ubarech. Barech is also 222. 222 to destroy Paroi. And how did Hashem do that? Hashem destroyed the Bechar. Bechar is 222. So that's why Paroi started out with 222, and he took away the number 6. But Mar Rabbi said we have to try to understand what is the significance of this number 216. That Paroi started out with the number 222, and he subtracted the number 6. To get to 216, what exactly is the special quality of the number 216? Why was it that we left Mitzrayim after 216 years? Well, Marav Rabbi Sai, amazingly, there's a Sefer Yad David from Rabbi David Oppenheim, Rav David Oppenheim was the great Rav of Prague, and he says something incredible. Says Rav David Oppenheim, how long were we in Mitzrayim? Well, we know there are different calculations, there are different numbers. And the different numbers are, we were literally there 210 years from the time that Yaakov Avinu came down to Mitzrayim. However, is that really the only way to make the calculation? Isn't there another way to make the calculation? Can we make the calculation that we should start calculating the years of Mitzrayim from when the Shvatim had children? Now, when did the Shvatim first have children? When Menashe and Ephraim were born, before Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim. When were Menashe and Ephraim born? Well, amazingly, the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer says Menashe and Ephraim were born 5 years before Yaakov came down, which means incredibly that we were actually in Mitzrayim 215 years, and we left in the year 216. Now we understand amazingly why we had to be in why the number 216 is the kayach that got us out of Mitzrayim, because we were literally in Egypt 215 years. Now let's try to understand another amazing thing. We know that in Mitzrayim the pasuk says, Dar shlishi yavai b'kal Hashem, that you cannot marry the first 3 generations of Egyptians. Why not? What's the inyan that you can't marry the first 3 generations of an Egyptian? Says Rav David Oppenheim, quoting the Chizkuni, how long is a generation? The pasuk says, "As mispar yamecha amale," the number of your days I will fill. Amale is 72. Because typically a human lifespan is 70 years, the year of birth, the year of death, 72 years. So since a typical generation is 72 years, 3 generations is 72 times 3, 216. We were in Mitzrayim 3 generations, so therefore we are not allowed to marry an Egyptian for 3 generations, because that's the amount of time we spent in Mitzrayim, 216 years, 3 generations. This explains incredibly why Moshe Rabbeinu, at the end of his stay in Egypt, divorced his wife Tzipora, and Yisro ultimately brought her back. Why did Moshe stay married to Tzipora? Why did Moshe leave his wife Tzipora, and why did Yisro bring her back? You see, Moshe knew who was Tzipora. Tzipora came from Yisro. Yisro came from Midian. Midian came from Hagar. Hagar came from Mitzrayim. So Tzipora was okay. Tzipora was what we call a 4th generation Egyptian. So Moshe said, look, we're in year 216. I could still stay married to you because we're only in Egypt 3 generations. You're the 4th. But as year 216 was approaching, Moshe said, if I remain married to Tzipora a little bit longer, if we're in Mitzrayim more than 216 years, I'm not going to be able to stay married to Tzipora. So Misafek Moshe had no choice but to divorce Tzipora. But Yisro understood, as soon as we were redeemed exactly in year 216, that really, we were only in Egypt 3 generations, and in fact now Moshe Rabbeinu could take his wife back. Marv Rabbi Sai, that is why we left Mitzrayim in year 216. But we were supposed to be there double that amount of time, 430 years. We were supposed to be there another 3 generations. So if God had not taken us out of Egypt, Hare anu uvanenu uvnei vanenu, we would have had to spend another 3 generations in Mitzrayim, because we got out 215 years early. We got out 3 generations early. Says the holy Yismach Moshe. So how did God take us out of Egypt? He took us out of Egypt by taking the number 216 and knocking it down to Yara to 215. But let me share something with you amazing, says the Yismach Moshe. We know there's a great principle, Ki meitzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim arenu naflois. As God took us out of Egypt, He will perform miracles for us. So too, just like God took us out of Egypt by taking the number 216 and knocking it down to 215, so too la'asad lavai, God will also take the Yetzer Hara and knock him down 1. What's He going to do? We know the Yetzer Hara's name is Samach Mem Aleph Lamed, which is 131. La'asad lavai, God's going to take that name and make it 130. and it's going to be called Hine Hashem Roichev Al Av Kal, the pasuk says in Yeshaya. Just like Hashem took away one when he destroyed Paroi by making Rechev. Paroi took Rechev 222, he made it 216, but God knocked him down to Yara 215. God will take the Samach Mem Aleph Lamed, remove the Aleph, and destroy him. So I want to add 3 chidushim to this year that we never said before. The first chidush is as follows. Maybe this is one of the reasons why we have a siyum on Erev Pesach. What's the inyan of a siyum on Erev Pesach? Because we know the main target of the Yetzer Hara is we should not make a siyum. Samach Mem Aleph Lamed is siyum mesechta ein la'asais. However, when we make a siyum, we're taking away the aleph and we're making it siyum mesechta la'asais. Perhaps the reason we make the siyum on Erev Pesach is it's a tefillah that just like God took away one from the Satan when he took us out of Mitzrayim, and he made the 216 into 215, we're also mispalel Hashem should take the Samach Mem Aleph Lamed siyum mesechta ein la'asais and transform it into siyum mesechta la'asais. That's chiddush number 1. So you would think, friends, that if the number 216 is such a prominent number in the night of the Seder, that there should be a remez to it somewhere in the Haggadah. We should say somewhere, Baruch Hamakayim Baruch Hu, Baruch Shenasan Torah La'ama Yisrael, Baruch Shahitzianu B'Shem Reish Yod Vav. Why don't we find 216 in the Seder? Says the holy Arizal in the Sefer Pri Etz Chaim, you could not find a remez to 216 any earlier. Says the Arizal, the Gematria Ha Lachma Anya is amazingly 216. Ha is 6, Lachma is 79, Anya 131. Ha Lachma Anya 216. We destroy the Satan, we destroy the Malach HaMaves, and this is the remez at the first word of the Haggadah, Halach Ma'anya Gematria 216. So the Yisod of Yetzias Mitzrayim is Hashem's 72-letter name, Chesed. Chesed is 72. Rabbi say this year we have a unique opportunity the first days of Pesach. We have 3 24-hour periods in a row, a 3-day Yom Tif. How many hours of Kedusha is a 3-day Yom Tif? That's right, 72 hours. The Rebbe Hashem is giving us tremendous chesed, 72 hours, where we're able to have concentrated kedusha without any distraction. We're able to focus on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chesed and Hashem's rachamim. 3 days of Yom Tif, the koyach of chesed, the koyach of 72. Now, by the way, the lechem hapanim stayed fresh from Shabbos to Shabbos. Let's think about that for a moment. What does that mean, the lechem hapanim stayed fresh from Shabbos to Shabbos? That's 9 days, right? That's from Friday to Shabbos. That's a total of 9 days. How many hours is that? What's 9 times 24? 9 times 24, says Reb David Oppenheim, is 216. The lechem hapanim stayed fresh for 216 hours. But finally, I want to share with you a great secret that a friend of mine, Rav Shlomo Kalman Gross, shared with me from the Leshem, Rav Shlomo Elyashiv. He says that the day the world was created, we know B'Nisan Nivra Ha'olam, but Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the day that man was created, but Chav Hei Adar is the day that the first day of creation. From Chav Hei Adar, those 5 days, and then the month of Nisan, and all the days of Sfira until Shavuos. How many days are there from Chav Hei Adar until Shavuos? Ayam v'Noira, there's 72 days. This whole tzara started around that time, Chav Hei Adar. We hope the Rebbe Hashem is going to shower us with tremendous chesed, the chesed of the 72 hours of the first days of Yom Tif, chesed of the 72 days from Chav Hei Adar until Shavuos. May the Rebbe Hashem send the refuah to all the Chayei Yisrael. Hashem should send Yeshuas to all of Klal Yisrael. And the Rebbe Hashem should be Merachim Aleinu, we should be Zoicha, Gesund tehet l'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. Thank you so much.
All participants are muted.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.